Hello, loved ones at Inwood. Well, we're facing another week meeting virtually, as they call it. We have seen a little bit of break in the map over this past week, or at least part of the week. I'm doing this on a Tuesday, so I'm not real sure what Wednesday and Friday will bring. But there were actually a number of gold counties on the map when I looked at it this past week. Just as a reminder, we're going to be keeping our eye on the map, and if we turn gold or green or yellow, we will have our in-church service, our sanctuary service. In the meantime, I'll continue to do this even if we are having the in-church services. I'm not sure that we are going to move that quickly. Our stats in this county look pretty bad right now. And I'm starting to hear about people that I know and others who are surrounded by church groups that I know that are counseling church and doing other things. But we'll see what the Lord does for us and see when He can get us back. We're going to depend on Him to get us back, because it's certainly not the government or it's not us that are ever going to get ourselves back. We're going to have to pray hard and hope that the Lord takes care of this. Having said all that, this week I'll be talking about Samuel. Now, as I said, this is Tuesday, so sometime between now and the end of the week, I will be uploading the sermon, and I'll probably send it to you Saturday night or Sunday. Samuel is one of my favorite people in the Bible, and I'll talk more about that when time comes for the sermon. I don't know of any other items for announcements. I know the trustees have been hard at work with the people in the parsonage, and I know that they're taking good care of the building, and everything is going well. The only other thing I would say is Shirley has been working on the statistical report. That has been moved back. It would normally have been already due or sometime pretty quick, but they've moved that back to, I think, March. So Shirley and I will be working on that, and when we ever come back together, or if we have a Zoom meeting for our ad board, we'll present the statistical report. Just as a reminder to you, that statistical report is a very, very important report, because the apportionments that we pay to the conference every single month are based on what we put in that report. So anyway, Shirley and I will do that and take it back to the board, and hopefully all will go well. Blessings to all of you. I lost a member at the Marvin Chapel, a lady that I worked with years and years ago, so if you'll keep the Marvin Chapel family lifted up. Her name was Phyllis, and she was a lovely person, a nurse for years and years and years. So anyway, there are things going on around us. If you know of anybody who needs prayer, or you want to pass anything along to me, please feel free to do so. Speaking of Phyllis, once again, I'll be doing that funeral from 10 a.m. Monday the 18th until about 1 or 2, so I won't be available in those hours. Take care, God bless, and the Spirit be with you. Good morning, everyone. I guess some of you have been involved in going out to try to get your shots for the COVID virus. Our experience was not good. A lot of wasted time and no results. But anyway, we are meeting again virtually. Seems like forever now. Hopefully we'll be back together sometime soon. But in the meantime, let's talk about what our subject is today. And our subject today is call. C-A-L-L, a very simple word. We're going to be talking about two scriptures today, one in John and one in Samuel, that talk about someone who got called into the ministry. But when I started thinking of this word call, I started thinking of all the annoying calls we get in our lifetime. I thought back too about the history of the phone, for me at least. I don't know about you, but when I was a youngster, we were in a house in the country and we were on what was called a party line. So someone would call and you'd have to stand there and listen to see just what the ring was. Was it one ring? Was it two, three, or whatever? So that you would know that the call was coming for you. On the other hand, if you wanted to make a call to a loved one, or if I wanted to call someone to make a date or whatever the case might be, I might have to wait for a number of minutes or perhaps an hour while a couple of the other people who shared our phone line caught up on the gossip. So it was good and bad, I guess. It was a much easier time back then. You got a lot fewer phone calls. People visited rather than calling. But it was quite a pain to have to share a phone line. Of course, things changed and people got their own phone line. And I can remember a time, it doesn't seem that long ago, when I was still working and traveling from DC to West Virginia and vice versa. I would say that it was a 2-hour time period when no one could get a hold of me. I would listen to the radio, I might pray, I might practice a sermon when I finally got a church. All kinds of things could be done, but nobody could reach me. Of course, there were 2 times when my car completely broke down and I had to go search out someone's apartment, in one case in the middle of DC, to use their phone. And another case at 4-something in the morning on a dark highway, I had to go to a local convenience store. So having a cell phone eventually came in very handy, but not having a cell phone was quite nice as well. We still have a home phone, I assume you do too, but I'll be perfectly honest with you, I maybe get one call every 3 or 4 months that I actually answer, and there's someone who I know and needs something. Lisa has a couple of her parishioners that call on their house phone, but 99 times or even more than that, out of 100, it is someone that we don't need to speak to, a product we don't want to buy, and a spiel we don't want to hear. My cell phone's the same way. I have caller ID, and when it comes in, sometimes it'll say potential spam, or it'll say so-and-so company and so on. I don't even bother to answer them. So this idea of a phone has changed greatly. We have one at our fingertips all the time, but quite often we don't want to answer the call. We don't know who it is sometimes, and why should we bother with it? If they are of any importance to us, they will leave a message. Have you ever said that? Don't worry about it. If they're important, they'll leave a message. And so it is, things have really, really changed. There are a few people that I know who have business phones and people who have private phones so that they can keep everything straight. But for me, it's all one phone, just my cell phone. I'm going to share 2 scriptures here with you in a couple minutes. And once again, they are about calls. Certainly, they're not about phone calls, but there are very important calls. And over the years, even though I'm complaining about all the people that call that I don't want to talk to, I have received some very important calls in my life. Calls about illnesses and deaths, and calls about very important things that I needed to know. So just because a call comes in doesn't mean that we have any idea, at least sometimes, of the importance of what is coming our way. And I think that's exactly what we'll find in our scriptures today. We will find 2 people who are called, and they have somewhat different reactions to the calls, but they are also called under different circumstances. So it is understandable that they will not act the same way. The first one is in the book of John, as I said. It's in the first chapter. It's late on in the first chapter. It starts with the 43rd verse. And it's Jesus calls Philip and Nathanael. And if you'll remember, they will be with him for quite a while after this call. It goes like this. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now, Philip, let me stop there. I should stop there. Think about that now. How straightforward is that? Not coming with some prepared speech or, "Do you know who I am?" A simple "follow me." Now, this is Philip and how he's going to react. Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter, and we know that they will eventually be a part of this band as well. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, the son of Joseph from Nazareth." Now, I want you to hear the difference. This is what is being said by Philip, who was just talking to Jesus. But listen to what Nathanael has to say. Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" How about that phone call? Can anything good come out of something that says potential spam or whatever? Something that we don't trust? Philip said to him, "Come and see." When Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him, he said to him, "Here is truly an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." Jesus is prophesying about him. Nathanael asked him, "Where did you get to know me?" Jesus answered, "I saw you under the fig tree before Philip called you." Nathanael replied, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus answered, "Do you believe because I told you that I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven opened and the angels of God ascending upon the Son of Man." Now, our second call story is one of my very favorite parts of the Bible. It's an Old Testament story. It comes from 1 Samuel, the book of 1 Samuel. Now, this one is going to be a little bit different. Jesus is actually approaching Philip and talking to him. And Philip has some knowledge of Jesus. But now we find this boy Samuel, a boy who is serving one of the great prophets of the time. And this is how this story goes. Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Eli. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were not widespread. If you remember, there were times when a lot of prophecy was going on, and there were times when very little prophecy was happening. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see, was lying down in his room. The lamp of God had not gone out yet, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. You remember the Ark of the Covenant, that case that they had. It was in the temple. And this is where Samuel was sleeping. The Lord called, "Samuel, Samuel." And he said, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call. Lie down again." Now remember, Eli is someone of great import, a great prophet of the time. And this is Samuel, his young man, who is waiting on him hand and foot. So naturally, when he hears a voice, he runs to his master. "I did not call. Go lie down." So he went and lay down. The Lord called again, "Samuel, Samuel." Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But he said, "I did not call you, my son. Lie down again." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. In other words, he had not been received or had not received any prophecy. So the Lord had not come to him with any to prophesy or to serve at that time. The Lord called Samuel again the third time, and he got up and went to Eli. Here I am, for you called me. Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the boy. Therefore Eli said to Samuel, Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, Speak, Lord, for the servant is listening. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. Now the Lord came and stood there, calling before Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, Speak, for your servant is listening. Then the Lord said to Samuel, See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make both ears of anyone who hears of it tingle. On that day, I will fulfill against Eli that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. From beginning to end. For I have told him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew because his sons were blaspheming God. The backstory of this is that Eli has had great importance in the country as a judge, and now Eli is being told that since his sons are not taking up the mantle that they should have taken up, that his power will end. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be expiated by sacrifice or offering forever. In other words, his family will not be able to come to God and sacrifice or ask for forgiveness at that time. Samuel lay there until morning, then he opened the doors of the house of the Lord. Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. But Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son. Here I am, Eli. What was it that you were told? Do not hide it from me. May God do so to you, and more also if you hide anything from me that he told you. So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. Then he said, It is the Lord. Let him do what seems good to him. As Samuel grew up, the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all of Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was a trustworthy prophet of the Lord. Well, I mentioned earlier that one of these readings was one of my very favorites, and it certainly is the one in Samuel. As I was going through the process, just like Charlie did or any of the other pastors you've had in the past, we were asked to give our call story. Every time I went to a meeting when I was first inducted into the program, tell us about your call. What does your call mean to you? How did it come about? But also in that call, this particular story, this particular account is so important to me because we were also asked to say, if you were to liken your call to one of those people in the Bible, who would it be? Well, mine was Samuel, because there was time after time where I felt like I was being called, and I would go and I would talk to this pastor, or I would talk to this person that I knew well, or a friend, or someone I thought who knew the church. I was continually inquiring about this call. I didn't know it was a call. I didn't call it a call. But I knew something was going on in my life, and I was searching everywhere but where I should have been searching. And I'll tell you a little story. A friend of mine and Charlie's actually, we were up on an Emmaus weekend, and the guy said to me, he's a pastor, and he said to me, have you made any kind of decision yet? And I said, no. He said, I'm going to tell you what I foresee for the future. I said, what's that? He said, one of these days, you'll be older and you'll be up in a nursing home or something, and I'll come walking in to visit, and I'll say, hey, have you made up your mind yet? And you'll sit there in your wheelchair and say, no, I haven't made up my mind yet. Well, that kind of spurred me on, I guess, that and some other things. And I started to think about who it was that was really calling me. It wasn't another pastor. It wasn't a friend. It wasn't somebody that I went to church with. That the call had come from God, and if it came from God, then I should say just what Eli told Samuel to say. here I am. So that story is kind of special to me. But that story could fit all of us, couldn't it? We've all been called to some kind of ministry. If nothing else, talking to our friends. If nothing else, telling somebody, hey, come to church with me sometime. So I read this little article. I kind of want to share parts of it with you. What can we learn from the unexpected call from God? It asks. At first, it says, notice that it comes when people are not prepared for it. I don't know any of us that are prepared when all of a sudden God comes and says, hey, it's time. It's time for you to come to church, or it's time for you to turn your life around, or it's time for you to stop what you're doing, or it's time for you to take up something you should be doing. We're not prepared for it. I wasn't prepared for it. I was searching everywhere. I've known others who were not prepared for it. It doesn't come in a worship service or on a high holy day a lot of times. It could. Some people are affected by a church service and it changes their entire life. It comes while everyone is snoozing, so to speak, just like Samuel was, when they're not thinking about church, when they're not thinking about a call, when they're not thinking about how they're going to serve God. I remember about 4 o'clock one morning driving to work, pitch black, and I actually said out loud, I don't want to become a pastor. Why I said it, I don't know. Why I verbalized it in an empty car other than me, I don't know. But not in an audible voice, but in a voice I heard very plainly in my head. God said, who is it that's calling you to be a pastor? And that was a changing point in my life. It comes while everyone is snoozing, this article says. Of course, we should be aware that God loves to place surprise calls. He goes on to list a few of them, and listen to all these. Your call might be like some of these. God called Rebecca while she was drawing water at a city well. He called Amos while he was picking fruit. Paul while he was on the road to Damascus. Martin Luther while he was in the bathroom. Yes, really, the bathroom. John Wesley while he was listening to a layperson read scriptures. T.S. Eliot while he was working in a bank, and C.S. Lewis while he was riding in the sidecar of his brother's bike. God could speak to you while you are doing some of these things or any other thing that you do on a daily basis. And he cautions, be prepared to listen. A second lesson, he says, we can learn from this story of Samuel. He says, from the story of Samuel's call is that none of us can grasp the full significance of God's word by ourselves. We have to find others. Believe me, once I decided that I needed to do something, I sought the advice of many others to tell them that finally there was some decision and to ask for them to bless the ministry that I hope to be a part of. Samuel listened and heard God's call at an unexpected time, but he didn't know what he was hearing until he got some help from Eli. Sometimes it does take someone else to help us, just like the man who told me I'd be sitting in a wheelchair. As important as it is to listen for God's word, we must also be willing to discuss what we hear with others so that we can receive help in figuring out the message of God that he has for us. It is good to read the Bible alone, but even better to study it with others. I long for the time when we can come back together and have Bible study. It is important to listen for what God is saying through current events, but far more helpful to talk about our insights with others. Excuse me. This is a pretty current thing that was just written, and he talks about the pandemic we're in. We just finished a year that included a pandemic and a presidential campaign. And though through it all we were bombarded with messages and images from television and the internet, in the face of so much stress and upheaval, it is certainly good to think and pray and seek God's guidance. But it is equally important that we share insights with each other through open and honest conversations so that we can receive the help we need to plot a faithful Christian course in this world. Samuel listens when God calls and then shares what he hears with Eli. We should do the same. I wanted to stop there just for a second and say, one of the differences in these two stories that we've heard, these two accounts that we heard, Jesus goes directly to Philip. Philip immediately is moved by Jesus, understands who Jesus is, and then goes to seek others. But when he goes to seek others, Nathanael hasn't seen Jesus. He hasn't been directly called by Jesus, and there's some hesitation there. Eli is approached by God, by the Lord, it says, in the temple, but he doesn't see him. He hears a voice, so he goes elsewhere to look. So we have to keep our ears open, and we have to know when that call comes, that when Jesus calls, when God calls, it's time for us to answer. It's time for us to act. And how do we do that? This guy says, stay open. He says, a final message of the story is to stay open to what God is doing in the world. We learned earlier that the word of the Lord was rare in those days, and Eli's eyesight had begun to grow dim so that he could not see. We wouldn't blame old Eli if he lost interest in the work as a priest and began to tune out the call of God. Like people who use the do not disturb mode on their iPhone to reduce unwanted calls. Perhaps Eli would even stop answering the call of God because he was tired of getting surprises. But give Eli credit. He kept the ears open for what God was saying. And after 3 visits from Samuel, he perceived that it was the Lord calling the boy. He discovered that God was doing a new thing through Samuel, and this gave him the insight needed to instruct Samuel to give God a response. Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. This enabled Samuel to enter a relationship with God that lasted a lifetime and had a powerful and positive impact on people of Israel. That young man lying there not knowing, but with the help of Eli, realizing that it was the Lord who was calling him, eventually was able to touch an entire nation of people. Well, that's my idea of talking about calls today. Just remember that just like with that caller ID, you're going to have to keep your eyes and your ears open to know when the Lord is calling. And when the Lord calls, then we need to drop everything else and answer that call. Well, if you guys need anything, you can text me, you can email me, and yes, you can even call me, and I'll answer. Take care, you guys. God bless.